Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Garrity of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today, as usual. But, Jim, I have to start with a question. Which is more dysfunctional at this point, the Republican primary process or the New York Jets?
Ooh, ouch, ouch. I'll let people insert their preferred sucker punch metaphor here. In fact, I guess I could suppose, to make a nice segue to our first martini, Hillary Clinton feels like she's been sucker punched twice this morning by both Bernie Sanders and the FBI.
Yes.
An unusual tag team if there ever was one.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that as a buddy cop movie, but let's go there anyway. New poll shows Bernie Sanders, who we were pretty impressed was only down 6 in New Hampshire last week, now up 7 against Hillary Clinton. So, man, the Ben and Jerry's at those rallies must really be paying key dividends there up in New Hampshire. So not exactly what Mrs. Clinton wanted as one headline, but it's probably preferred to this headline, Clinton giving up server amid concerns about classified data. That's right. Hillary Clinton, who defiantly said at the UN back in March that she would not be turning over her server to Congress or anyone else, is in fact giving it over now. The FBI seized it yesterday. It's now in the possession of the Justice Department. And one of the reasons for that, Jim, is because those first 40 out of 30,000 that she actually allowed to be handed over of those emails that were on that private server, 4 out of 40 were found to contain classified information. 2 of those 4, top secret information. So if that's just the tip of the iceberg, this could get very interesting for Mrs. Clinton, very bad for Mrs. Clinton, and the fact that it appears, at least on the surface, that the Justice Department is taking this seriously is good news.
Yeah, 2 things kind of jump out about this. One being that she's issuing a statement that she's, willingly turning over her servers to the FBI. And yes, except these servers have been under subpoena from the House for several months now. And here's the thing. She's supposed to get a prize for agreeing to cooperate with the FBI. Is this some sort of really extraordinary sacrifice or generous gesture she's making there, Greg? I mean, when the FBI asks for something, pretty much you give it. The question then is, do they have to go get a subpoena first or not? And then the second thing is, she said, there's absolutely nothing no emails I had were classified at the time I sent or received them. Notice that little Clintonian asterisk there. 1, that doesn't seem to be true. 2, people who work in the intelligence world or who recently left the intelligence world, people familiar with the classification system say, look, this was not garden variety stuff. This was top secret. This was stuff that involved signals intelligence, geospatial satellite intelligence. This was the good stuff, so to speak. And it should not have ever been on an unsecure system. It should not have been in private email systems. People who know this stuff say this is a really huge deal. Whether or not there's a prosecutor who will treat this seriously or is willing to indict the, as of now, Democratic frontrunner in most states is another story. We'll see how this shakes out. But the idea that this was going to blow over and everybody would say, everybody uses private email systems. This is no big deal. That is not the case here. And this has now gone up one more notch in terms of the seriousness of a threat to the Hillary Clinton presidential ambitions.
Quote from Reince Priebus at the RNC, all this means is that Hillary Clinton, in the face of FBI scrutiny, has decided she has run out of options. She knows she did something wrong and has run out of ways to cover it up. So we'll see if this adds any workload to lawmakers when they come back next month. That should certainly add a new dimension to the Benghazi Committee and Chairman Trey Gowdy, but we'll see how Congress addresses this in a few weeks. All right, on to the bad martini. Now, speaking of Congress and big work facing the lawmakers when they return, early September, we're expecting votes on the Iran nuclear deal. And we've been talking a lot about different Democrats who are on the fence, and some of who have even said they're going to oppose the president on this. Chuck Schumer's the only Democrat, but he's also, at this point, supposed to be the next Democratic leader in the Senate. And there's been a smattering of House Democrats as well. The only Republican, apparently, at least in the Senate, who looks to be considering a yes vote on this is Jeff Flake of Arizona, who sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's being lobbied hard by the White House. He's also being lobbied hard by conservatives, saying if you vote yes on this thing, you are going to get primaried in 2018. The Arizona Republic talked to Jeff Flake about this in a couple of different ways. And he says, first of all, the president will have enough votes to sustain a veto. And then he talked about constituents calling a lot on this issue. And here's his response, Jim. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of calls. You get a lot of calls on a lot of things. I was getting a lot of calls yesterday on wild horses that the U.S. Forest Service was supposed to round up. But yeah, there are calls and emails to the office and calls personally from people who just want to know where I am. Jim, I think a lot of conservatives think he's been a pretty big disappointment so far in the Senate. His attitude towards this is kind of baffling.
You know, for a while when Schumer was saying he was reviewing the plan, you could understand that you could kind of understand why Schumer ultimately came out against it. The idea that, look, Schumer's a Democrat and he wants to believe in his president. He wants to believe the president's making the right call, but obviously he's, for all of his flaws, Schumer's got a pretty strong pro-Israel and tough on Iran record and couldn't take the deal at face value. He did his review and he came out as a no. If you'd said to me Schumer would vote no and Flake would vote yes, Greg, I would have told you that and Donald Trump will be the front runner, and Geno Smith will get punched out by a no-name player and won't be able to start for the first couple of weeks of the season. I don't know about you, Greg. Real life is starting to reach the point where a Sharknado looks normal. Maybe this is kind of some play acting on the part of Flake, a sense of I want to take my time. I want to review this. I don't want to be accused of rushing into this or being a knee-jerk opponent of the president. It looks obviously a bad deal to many of us, but if Flake wants to take more time to look into the nitty-gritty of it, fine. I just have a hard time believing any Republican could look at this and say, yeah, it looks like a good deal. And if he does, man, the headlines write themselves about a senator named Flake, huh?
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, this will probably be the last time we're laughing during this podcast because it's time for the crazy martini now. And, Jim, it just doesn't get much sicker than this. Newsweek magazine apparently still exists. That's the first shocker here. But writing in the pages of Newsweek, Rick Perlstein, who wrote a book called The Bridge a while back, talking about how the Republicans changed from Nixon to Reagan. Apparently, he's decided just to make as many people angry as possible. Here's how he starts his article entitled, "It's Time to Haul Down Another Flag of Racist Hate." You know that racist flag, the one that supposedly honors history but actually spreads a pernicious myth and is useful only to venal right-wing politicians who wish to exploit hatred by calling it heritage? It's past time to pull it down. Oh, wait. You thought I was referring to the Confederate flag. Actually, I'm talking about the POWMIA flag. And he goes on to say that the Nixon administration conjured up this idea of missing in action because they used to just consider pilots who were down to be killed, condemning the Nixon administration for actually wanting verification of what happening to these people, wanting public names of prisoners that the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong had because it would be a violation of the Geneva Conventions. Otherwise, Perlstein goes on to basically say that this was just a big public relations gambit because prisoners were never dealt with until after the war. This was really just a way of trying to demonize our Oriental enemy in this fight. And he goes on to say towards the end of this thing that it just needs to be done away with. Let me see here. He calls it that damned flag. It's a shroud. It smothers the complexity, the reality of what really happened in Vietnam. And as proof, he talks about a delegation in 1975 where folks from Congress went over to Vietnam, and because they were treated well by the Vietnamese government, who said there weren't any, that it must be true.
Are you familiar with the hashtag Slate pitches, Greg?
A little bit.
Slate used to have the corner on the market of the "you got to be kidding me" type articles like this. Then Vox came along and really expanded the market for freelancers putting out op-eds that are so spectacularly wrong-headed, so ipso facto ridiculous that you figured out it started out as a giant prank. Vox also, of course, had the groundbreaking coverage of the literal bridge between the West Bank and Gaza that stretches across Israel. Some claim this doesn't exist, but Vox has had that story before anybody else. One, I'd really like the author of that piece to go read it aloud outside of VFW post and just see how that goes for him. Right. It's so wrong-headed. It's so morally inverted. It's so deliberately provocative and outrageous. This is just to get traffic. This is just something to say, like everybody will, the editors are sitting around and saying, well, it's a terrible piece. It's off his rocker crazy, but everyone will go to the site to denounce it and link to the site to denounce it. That'll make up for it in traffic and will be okay. That's the only explanation I can come up with this, because it just seems, I almost can't get my head around it, Greg. And sometimes we can laugh about the crazy martini. With this one, everybody in the process of saying, yeah, we should run that op-ed, you kind of want to look at them and just say, really? Really? Of all the things in the world to write about and cover, you want to put this argument out there? So there we are, Greg. I want to go back to calling Flake a flake.
I think so. And it just goes back to how the left, even during the Cold War, we were the bad guy. We're still the bad guy in their eyes, regardless of what happened there, regardless of our mission. The fact that we were defending a people of the same race that we're accused of being racist towards is just insane. And it kind of goes back to the Iran deal, too. Our enemies, if we just talk to them, we can see that they're all reasonable and they don't hate us and they don't want to enslave everyone else in their region. They still believe the lie, and they're trying to make people who don't remember that era believe it, too.
As Gene Kirkpatrick said, they always blame America first.
On that bizarre note, Jim, we'll leave it there, and we'll pick it up tomorrow. Talk to you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and please tune in again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.